Good morning. My name is Paul Makapetris. I'm Chief Scientist at ThreatSTOP. I'm here with Tom Burns, the CEO, and Ophir Ashman, our Head of Security. Today's subject we're going to talk about is public policy, DNS policy, and risk, or how to get to one-click compliance. Protecting your network today has a new dimension. You have all the traditional worries about malware, spam, and DDoS, and techniques for dealing with that. Your firewalls, DNS filtering, antivirus, etc. Public policy, i.e. your government, adds some new dimensions. One of those is sanctions enforcement. So for example, the United States has 20 different sanction types. One of those we're going to be using as an example is Russia and the Ukraine. In addition to all of those sanctions, there also is an increasing set of legal issues that's coming up. Right now, Sony in Japan is suing a pirate website and trying to turn off access to that pirate website via DNS filtering in Germany. This is not a new idea, but it's still out there. So what we want to do, first of all, is talk about what the issues are. There's a dynamic geography going on. Back in February, when Russia invaded the Ukraine, not only did their tanks roll in, but their IT guys joined the battle and rerouted traffic in the areas that they overran back through Russia, so that you could be talking to somebody in Melitopol and you thought that it's a Ukraine ISP and you're all safe, but in reality, that traffic is being funneled back through Russia. Crimea has been that way for a long time. So what you need to do, in particular, if you're worried about, say, doing commerce with people in those areas, is how to figure out who the good guys are and where the boundary is today. We think the only good solution here is a solution that automates that because of the changing conditions. So one of the things you do is you take a look at how the traffic is being routed. It's a technical issue. And if traffic is coming from the Ukraine, but it's being routed through Moscow, you might or might not want to actually do that, look at that traffic, and you might or might not want to do business with people who might or might not have a gun at their heads. Why is this man in the middle for the traffic being taken back through Moscow? Why is it so significant? Well, if the traffic is going through Russian infrastructure, shown here with the Z, or a similar method with BGP hijacking, the man in the middle is free to inject new traffic, shown here as the arrows coming out of the Russian infrastructure. So you can inject traffic that looks like it's coming from the good guys. It's also free to meddle with the traffic that's passing through. DDoS attacks, lots of possibilities here. And you might say, well, okay, I have DNSSEC and I have the certificates and I have HTTP. But in point of fact, DNSSEC is not deployed in some large services, like, for example, Outlook. And certificate attacks from the hundreds of root certificate authorities is another well-known method. So you really would rather not have this possibility and be exposed to it. Complicating it, the designations that have been made by different countries for different kinds of sanctions over Russia and these other regimes number in the thousands. So just keeping track of the rules is hard. And you might say, well, I don't really have to worry about it. I can ignore it. But the Russian-controlled entities exist not only in Russia, but also in Africa, Cyprus, Kazakhstan, Belarus, you might expect. But there's a global issue here with sanctions that when you're talking about controlled entities, Russian or not, you have to be aware of. ignoring these sanctions is not really a choice. The Huawei CFO found that out when she landed in Vancouver. And just recently, Graham Bonham Carter, one of the more elite people in the UK, found themselves the subject of the Department of Justice action. So no one is really immune here. You have to pay attention to these rules. I didn't know doesn't really cut it as a defense. Here we have a company that was pretty much innocent. And as a result of that, they only had to pay $4 million in sanctions rather than what would have happened if they thought that this was a willful infraction. You might say, well, this is all over. The battle lines have stabilized. But just last Friday, April 6th, Microsoft got hit with $3 million over Russian sanctions. And these were sanctions involving Crimea, among other places, which the Russians took over in 2014. So the arm of the law will reach back to get you. $3 million might not be much to Microsoft, but it might be a lot to your business. And again, this is where Microsoft turned themselves in and said, please forgive us. And said, well, okay, that'll be $3 million. So the thing here is that public policy creates business risk. If you don't enforce sanctions, you can be penalized in a number of different ways. Fines, you can be denied access to banks, you can go to jail. And the issues right now are who controls what changes daily. The sanctions change frequently as well. And you also have to be careful about where you're operating from, where the sanctions may be different from a different country. So you really don't want to run the risk of running afoul of these, but keeping track of them is a pretty big problem.